So we are almost finished with this series of halachas having to do with all the different permutations of whether it was put down in a protected area, in an unprotected area, if it has a siman, if it doesn't have a siman, if it fell from the person, if it was put down deliberately. So the last thing that we saw yesterday, everybody with me? Okay. The last thing that we saw yesterday was that if it's detectable from the scenario that the object was put down deliberately in a place, and it seems to be that the area is somewhat either covered or protected, and you feel that there's a good possibility that no one will take it, then it's usher for you to take it because the owner meant to put it there, and the owner meant to put it there for safekeeping. However, if it's not well protected, and you feel that if it's left there that someone's going to go ahead and just take it for themselves, so then you should do the mitzvah of hashavas aveda. But that's only if it has a siman, as we said. If it has a siman, that way you'll be able to find the owner. Okay, now we'll go to Tesvav, and hopefully we'll do Tesvav and Teszayin today. And this, I think, really marks the end of all of these different permutations. V'imatza b'makom she'eno mishtamer klal. Let's say you find an object in a place which is completely unprotected, and anyone can come by and take it. Im yesh bo siman no tilu machriz. So if the object has a siman, it has markings or it has an identifying symbol on it, so then you should base it, that's where there's a mitzvah of hashavas aveda. And you have to make an announcement. V'im ein bo siman harehu shelo. Afilu hu vada hinuach shehinuchu b'rishus harabim lahakal mimaso v'shachachu sham. But if it doesn't have a siman, so then you're allowed to take it and actually keep it. And the reason, because, and this is true, whether it fell from the owner or whether it was deliberately put down. And this is a big chiddush. See, if it fell from the owner, we had said before that it depends. It depends whether you could take it if the owner is aware of it yet or not. But here we're talking about a case where, from the scenario, it seems like the owner is already aware that he put it down, because it's something that normally it's like a heavy item that a person would only carry on his back or in his arms, and he must have put something down to let's say lighten his load, and he forgot it there. Because what we have to assume is that if the person had even deliberately put it down, but then left, and it's now all of a sudden in a public area, so we have to assume that he just forgot about it, and then later on discovered his mistake, and he's had yesh. Aval imhu davar she'efshar shelo noda leva'olav shechachaso oso gam la'achar shekvar ba liyad hamotza yemunach ad sheyavo Eliyahu. But that's only if you know for sure, you can tell for sure that the owner must have been aware of this and put it down deliberately and has forgotten it. But if it's possible that the owner is not aware that this item is lost from them, and I guess, you'd have to sort of, he doesn't really tell us what the criteria for making that determination. But if it's possible that the owner has not yet discovered their loss, again, if it's derech nefila, we had said that it's always possible that the owner is not yet aware of their loss. So then, yehimuna chad sheyavo Eliyahu. So then, if it doesn't have a siman, and you picked it up, so you're not allowed to use it, or at least, like Rav Moshe said, you have to mark it down and be prepared to pay for the value of the object whenever that person will come to retrieve it. So I'm not sure I'm not sure in this circumstance how you would be able to make that determination. I'm thinking someone puts down a backpack in the Eaton Center. They put down a backpack in the middle of a busy shopping mall. In today's world, you might have to even worry about it's a bomb. I wouldn't touch it because maybe it's something explosive. But let's say it's a package that is visible. What's inside of it? A bunch of cans of tuna or of some other commodity, and a person put it down right there in the middle of a very busy intersection, and no one's there. No one's coming to claim it. So if you've been walking around for a while and it's clear that the owner is not anywhere in sight, so then if it has a siman, let's say the number of cans in the box, the brand of the item and the commodity, so then you'd have a mitzvah of hashava saveda. But if it doesn't have a siman, and you can tell that the owner has given up hope of retrieving it, then you're allowed to keep it. But to be honest, I don't know if it's possible to make that determination that for sure the owner has had yeush. I mean, who knows what might be going through the person's mind, or even if the person is aware that they accidentally left it there. So it's really not clear to me how to make this kind of determination. And so therefore, if we go to the next halacha in Tes Zayin, he says, "Bamed dvar mamurim b'davar she'efshar litlos hanachaso b'shechecha." So all of the aforementioned that we say that there's a mitzvah of hashava saveda is if it's possible that the person really accidentally left it there and forgot about it. Aval im I efshar litlos b'shechecha ela midas inichuhu ba'olav kan v'holchu lahem. But let's say that there's no way that you can attribute forgetfulness for this. This is a fragile item. He must have put it down there and basically abandoned it. Afal pi shalohi nichuhu ela lefi shaha umiyad yashuvu lekachto. He says, even if the owner, you might think to yourself that they put it down there only temporarily, and maybe they're going to come back to get it. But we don't say that. Harehu shel motzao afilu yesh bo siman. He says you're allowed to keep it, even if it has a siman. And the reason is shekivin sheba'olav hinichuhu midas afilu lefi shah b'makom sheino mishtamer klal. Because once someone does something irresponsible with their property, you put something in a public thoroughfare, even for a short period of time, but you put it in a place which is completely unprotected and is, anyone can come by and pick it up. Then certainly they have in mind that if someone else will come and take it, then they're more than welcome to take it. And therefore it's tantamount to a person consciously relinquishing ownership of the item. And therefore there's no mitzvah for a person to do the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda. In other words, essentially what the Rav Shulchan Aruch is saying over here is that if a person wishes to be irresponsible with their property, then I have no mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda. If it's clear that it wasn't an accident that they left it here, but it's clear from the circumstances that a person deliberately put something down. And by the way, maybe it's something that they don't want anymore. How many times does a person put an old chair or an old desk or an old appliance in front of their house, right? So in those kinds of situations where it's clear that a person has put something down recklessly or simply with abandon, literally with abandon, they're abandoning an object, so then there's no mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda. Even if a person might regret it afterwards, but once you put it down, you've made it hefker, it's free for the taking for everybody. Shene'emar asher tovad v'lo ha'me'aved mida'ato. And this is based on the way that we read the pasuk. There's only a mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda when the item asher tovad mimenu, where the Torah says where the item is lost from him. And the structure of the verb is very important. If it's lost from him, meaning that the object inadvertently gets lost. But if a person consciously loses something, if a person is me'abed, not tovad, but me'abed, he actively abandons it, then there's no mitzvah of hashavas aved. V'im hu safek hinuach v'yesh bo siman no telamachris. And if you're not able to tell whether it was deliberately abandoned or whether it was unintentionally lost, and if it has a siman, so then you have to take it and make a public announcement if you're not sure. But if it's clear from the circumstances that this person clearly abandoned it, so then you can go ahead and keep it for yourself. Now, this is an area of controversy in halacha, and I want to go through the Imrei Yaakov over here to show you that there's a slight machlokus over here. Now, so let's take a look at the Imrei Yaakov in Nun Ches. In Efshar Litlos, if there's no way for you to rely on the fact, or for you to assess the situation that it was accidentally put down. Pirish, afim lo ra'a lahedja b'shoshen ichusham. That means even if you didn't see the person deliberately put it down, but rak the nikara davar mishum de'efshar litlos v'shechecha. But it's impossible that this person just simply forgot it there. It's not something that a person would forget. Okay, it's a piece of machinery or something else in a very busy thoroughfare. So harehu shel motzao. So then you're allowed to keep it. Perush umotur lechatchila litlo la'atzmo. That you're allowed to even lechatchila go ahead and take it for yourself. Now, this is where we get into the controversy. He says, "V'hinei be'inyan zeh nechluku habeis Yosef v'harama." There is a machlokus here between Beis Yosef, who's the machaber, and the Rama, Rav Moshe Isserlis, who is the second author of the Shulchan Aruch. The das habeis Yosef dahama'abed mamono l'das. Right, so the Beis Yosef is of the opinion that if a person has an asset and he deliberately leaves it out irresponsibly in a public area, he abandons it. Person takes a bag of money and throws it in the middle of the street. Person takes a bag of coins and throws it in the middle of the street. Why he does that? Maybe he's come to some existential crisis in his life, and he's come to realize the sheer, lack of purpose, or how money can be the bane of all existence. Okay, physical items, right? You see movies and read stories about this where a person, has had it all, and then all of a sudden he leaves his convertible with the keys in it in the middle of the street and just walks out and says, "I've tasted everything in life. It's all vanity," and he just walks away from it. So the afal pi de'in zukukim lahachzir lo shenemar asher tovad prat lama'abed ladato. The Beis Yosef is of the opinion that even though there's no mitzvah of hashavas aveda, when a person deliberately abandons something, mikol makom asur l'roa davar zeh lito la'atzmo. But if it's clear from the circumstances that a person has deliberately abandoned his property, so then that doesn't give you a mandate to go ahead and take it for yourself. Da'afim zeh eino choshesh lishmor mamono, mikol makom malahen la'acherim lekachto harei lo hifkiram. He says, but that doesn't mean that a person necessarily made it hefker. It could be that a person basically said, I have so little regard for my property. I've come to despise it or dislike it or just become disgusted with it, that I've had enough. And he just throws a bag of money into the street or does something else to abandon property. That doesn't necessarily mean that he made it hefker. He could have, in a moment of emotional, intensity, just basically said, I hate this stuff, and just thrown it into the public square. But according to the Beis Yosef, this person didn't necessarily relinquish all ownership of it. He's just expressed his disdain for his property and has shown his disregard for his property. And therefore, I have no mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I can pick it up either and just keep it. So that's the attitude of the Beis Yosef. By the way, I was just looking it up before we started this year this morning. The Beis Yosef is talking about a situation where a person has livestock and they allow their livestock to graze in a place where it says that if any animals are found here, they will be shot and killed. And this person just doesn't care, and he lets his animals roam. So does that mean necessarily that he means to make his animals hefker? Or does it just mean that he's being irresponsible with his property? So that's the scenario that the Beis Yosef is describing, right? And so there's no mitzvah for me to restore something to someone who has shown the height of irresponsibility with his property. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the person made it hefker. So I'm not sure if throwing the bag of money into the street is a good example, but certainly when it's clear that a person is acting irresponsibly with his property, so then there's no mitzvah for me to do Hashavas Aveda, right? Avol das harama da Aveda midas havi hefker. But the Rama is more liberal, and he says that once a person has shown an irresponsible attitude towards his property and has abandoned his property, then that automatically is hefker. V'chol hakodem zacha, and anyone who wants to come and take it, by all means, it's yours. V'hiskim imo hashach ledina, and the shach agrees with the Rama. V'achareim nimshach harav kan, and this is how the Rav Shulchan Aruch is paskening over here as well. Ulam, but then he writes that yeshnam achronim she'achazu b'shitas haBeis Yosef. There are opinions who say that you should go like the Beis Yosef, and that just because a person has acted with abandon with his property doesn't give you a right to take it. Amnam nira gam ladas harama asur lekachas midivrei hachala v'halechem uchedome, or midavrei hachala v'halechem uchedome. But here's an interesting discussion that he has. If any of you, I don't know if they still do this in Israel, but I remember 30 years ago or 35 years ago when I was yeshiva bacher and being in Israel. So the local makolet, the local small grocery store, what they would do is, they sell fresh bread and fresh milk every day in the makolet, in the store, right? So they get their delivery from Tenuva and from the Angel Bread Factory. If everyone knows what I'm talking about, is let me see, is Wayne on the call this morning?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so Wayne, you know what I'm talking about, right? So
I know what you're talking about.
So where do these stores get their delivery of bread? So at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning,
and they leave it out in the front.
They leave out the like a whole box of freshly baked loaves of bread in the front of the store. So the question then becomes: is that an abandonment of property? Because that's they're just leaving it out there, and sort of anyone can come and take it.
I've often thought that.
You really?
They leave vegetables out there, and it surprises me that nobody ever takes it.
Well, by the way, it's altogether possible that there is a small amount of shrinkage. You know what the word shrinkage means? It's a euphemistic word for theft. I learned about that when I worked in a warehouse many years ago. That part of it, you have to factor in the cost of doing business when you have any kind of supermarket or warehouse kind of facility, that there's going to be a certain percentage of your goods that are going to disappear. And it basically means that either your employees or your customers are just going to walk off with stuff. So maybe they factor that into the cost. Who knows? I don't know. But the point is, let me just finish the text over here. He says, if there's stuff that's left in the front of a supermarket, like at 5 or 4 o'clock in the morning, He says, Shemunacham lifnot boker lifnei chanuyot hamakolet, where they place these boxes of bread and milk and vegetables in front of the makolet. It's clear that this is not a protected area. This is not an area where it's obscured from the public view. And it's clear that they're not trying to even protect the asset. But it has become such a convention that generally people don't take those goods. Society has learned to accept the fact that you don't take it. You know what we have, I don't think we do this anymore, but a lot of time, 20 years ago, when newspapers were still very big, sometimes they would leave a huge stack of newspapers wrapped up in string and on a street corner, right? Why? Because the newspaper boy who had his delivery route would pick up the papers from that street corner, and the truck would just drop them off on that street corner. It's the same kind of thing. Yes, it's clear that the owner of those newspapers, the newspaper company, put it down in a place which was open to everybody. But still, they rely on the convention of society that people know you just simply don't take those things. And therefore, and therefore any other kind of similar scenario, and it seems quite obvious. So you have to really assess the situation. But so we're not talking about those scenarios where that becomes the societal convention of leaving something in front of the store in the early hours of the morning for the storekeeper to bring them into his shop. But there are other scenarios, I would suppose, where if a person has clearly abandoned their property, there's certainly no problem for you to go ahead and take it. And certainly a clear example of that is if a person puts something in front of their house, an old appliance or an old piece of furniture, so then you don't have to, that's clearly they're not doing that in order to retrieve that property. They're doing it because they're essentially making a statement that I don't want this anymore. I've made this actively hefker. I believe that even the Beis Yosef would agree to that. The machlokas between the Beis Yosef and the Ramah is in a situation where a person is behaving irresponsibly with their property. Is there a mitzvah of hashavas aveda? So everyone agrees there's no mitzvah to restore something to an owner who is clearly acting irresponsibly with his property. But the only machlokas is, did he make that hefker in that kind of scenario with the animal that he allows to go roaming out? Right? Someone tells you have a friend who has a pet, and there's coyotes in the neighborhood, and your friend and you are talking about the coyotes are eating the small animals, the small people's pets, right? And you tell your friend, you better not let your little poodle walk out at night, because that's when the coyotes are out and there's a good chance he's going to be eaten. And your friend says, I don't care. I'm just going to let, my dog go stir crazy. I'll let him do whatever he does, and I'll take my chances. So you're walking out at night one night, about to get into your car, and you see that your friend's poodle is walking around the neighborhood. There, clearly, there's no mitzvah for you to pick up the poodle and bring it back to your friend, because your friend is basically, it's clear that he said he's taking his chances. So in the morning, you discover that your friend's poodle was eaten. So you don't have to feel bad. It's clear that he was not taking it seriously and was not being responsible, and so you don't have to deal with it anymore. You don't have to bear any kind of responsibility. That, in other words, when the owner himself is not willing to protect his property, there's no obligation for you to protect it for him. That's essentially the halacha. Okay, questions, comments?
So, Rabbi, I just wanted to add, your whole thing, how does that happen in Israel?
Yes.
It's one of the many inexplicable things in Israel that does not go according to logic. So that's my 2 cents.
You may be right, Alan, although I suspect probably in most Middle Eastern countries that's become the convention. I would not be shocked if you went to Egypt or to Jordan, and discovered the exact same practice. I would like to say that, yes, the Jewish people are an amazing people and we do things uniquely. But until I have the evidence for that, I'm just going to assume that just, everyone, there are social contracts that exist in every society, right? Who was the first to talk about social contracts? I remember learning about this years ago. But social contracts basically mean that when all of society agrees to a convention such that if a person were to violate that social contract, they would be ostracized from the society, it becomes sort of like something that everyone abides by. And it's not necessarily that there's anything miraculous about it. Every member of that society has a vested interest of not being ostracized, and that's why they abide by the social contract. So, I guess we'll see what happens with this election. Okay.
The point, just sorry to add one more thing, and I'm sure you experienced this when you lived in Israel, and Wayne can attest to this, is that in Israel, things do not work on, they work on their own sphere. In North, outside of Israel, everything works completely logically and straight and narrow. But in Israel, anything goes, like things don't make sense, etc. That's what I was trying to say.
Yes, I agree with you. In general, in principle, I think that everyone in Israel acts like we're all mishpacha, but I'm just not sure whether this example is an illustration of that. We'd have to examine whether this is a unique practice or whether it's, look, how many of you remember getting bottles of milk delivered to your front door? Right? That wasn't that long ago, was it? Anyone ever remember? Does anyone remember that? Right? So the milkman leaves the bottles of milk at your front door, and it was pretty standard that nobody took your bottles. Did they do this in Toronto? No one knows what I'm talking about.
No, we had that in Toronto. There's many houses that were built in the 40s and 50s that have a little door on the side of the house where
Yeah,
you
a milk
put
box. You're right, Wayne.
Okay. All right. But clearly, yes, there has been a deterioration within society because today, the big issue, why do people get these video doorbells, is because they want to be able to see that if a UPS package or a FedEx package has come to their door, they want to know that no one has come to take the packages. That's an issue that is plaguing society. Is that while Amazon is the business model is to deliver packages through the mail, one of the problems is that you see every once in a while that someone's package was stolen from their doorstep. And so, yes, things have changed.
That's why that halakha that we learned in the SCP about being able to kick the package into the house may have some real value on Shabbos.
Exactly. Right.
They're called porch thieves.
Porch thieves. There you go.
And I'm wondering whether society is just, maybe I'm sounding old, but going downhill so that where there was trust in a certain area, that's diminishing.
I agree. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. But sometimes these things are cyclical. Who knows? Maybe the pendulum will swing back at some point. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful day. We'll continue. We'll finish hopefully this set of halachas tomorrow. Okay.
Shkoyach.